cheese on it.
Not bad. Not bad. What do you think about the cattle mutilations, John?
Well, as you know, Linda Howe, who wrote Alien Harvest for the CBS affiliate in Denver, and I did a few field trips together, and was able to talk to her quite a bit about it, and thought I knew a lot about it. It's been very interesting, going on for quite some time. It's obviously possible that we have the technology to do that. I suspect everything and everybody. Who's really doing it, I don't know. Why they're doing it, I don't know. I kind of suspect that AIDS comes into the question somewhere. But the more I find out, that the less I know.
That's exactly what has happened to me.
Every question that I have answered, that I have found the answer to, there's been 20 more questions posed.
Yeah.
So now I'm almost hesitant to have a question answered, because it just raises 20 more questions.
Well, you know, Arizona is one of the greatest experimental grounds for helicopter development in the country. Were you aware of that?
No.
They actually build Apache helicopters down in southern Arizona, and there's many times in Arizona you see flights of helicopters, all different types of helicopters. Recently there's been an awful lot of black unmarked helicopters with dark windows, you can't even see in the things, but they're apparently able to change the density of the windows from light to dark at will, because you can see the same helicopter. As it flies, the windows will either become opaque or clear. I don't know how they do that, but I guess it could be done with some pigment that changes color with the stimulus of electricity or heat. I don't know. But coming back from visiting my parents in Texas, we were driving up Route 666 near the Roosevelt Reservoir, and my wife and I both witnessed two helicopters flying. Couldn't have been more than 70 or 80 feet above the ground, and they were bobbing up and down according to the terrain. In other words, they obviously had terrain following radar, and they had the helicopter on automatic pilot, so it was following the exact contour of the terrain. And it was amazing to watch this, and they passed no more than 100 feet in front of the car across the highway, and they made not one sound, no noise whatsoever. Now, I'd heard rumors that there were helicopters that made no noise, and this was the first time that I had ever seen helicopters that made no noise. But these were helicopters. They were military helicopters, and they made no noise whatsoever. So I know that the rumors are true, that we do have helicopters that make no noise, and at night could configure themselves to look like UFOs and fly around fields, and could pick up cattle without leaving footprints or signs or tracks, and could mutilate those cattle and crop them back in fields. Now, it's funny that not too long after these 10 or 15,000 cases of animal mutilation, mostly cattle, had been reported, we began to see stories in newspapers about cow's blood being used in emergencies for transfusions for humans. And we began to read all these experiments that they've been doing with cow's blood, but yet we can find no research facility by the government or anybody else with enough cattle to have performed any of these experiments to come up with the conclusions that they have reached. So I don't know the answer, and I'm not saying that that's the answer, and I'm not saying that it's the government doing it, but I'm very hesitant to believe that it's extraterrestrial simply because no one's ever been caught, mainly because of the nature of the organs and the tissue that is taken. All of it points to somebody wanting large amounts of blood, and number two, tissue samples that would tell what kind of pollution has moved up the food chain into large animals, specifically radiation. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a definite possibility. And there's no question in my mind that they have these silent helicopters. I don't think, as some people say, that they're just very quiet. I think they are absolutely silent.
Well, the ones that passed about 100 feet in front of our car across the highway in a very rural portion of Arizona where there's hardly any people at all except Indians who probably don't even care at all. Most rural people don't care if they see helicopters. But these things made no noise, John. No noise at all.
I had an interesting thing happen in April. I ferried an L-1011 from Marana, Texas to England, and they had occasion to stay at Marana, which, as you know, was an ex-Air Force base, and then supposedly an ex-CIA base, and I had never been there before. But I was there for 2 or 3 nights, and every night about like 12 or 1 o'clock, there would be the most massive deployment of helicopters. It was just like being in Vietnam, and I spent several years over there. And I get up in the morning, where in the hell did those things come from? And the second night, I finally asked somebody, and they said, oh, they've got an underground facility that they use. It just comes out of the middle of the runway, and he was very non-specific. But apparently there is quite a large underground base under Marana, and that's the first. I'd heard about it, but I never believed it until I stayed down there. There must be something underground because there was nowhere else for these things to park. And I was quite familiar with the field having flown in and flown out.
Well, it's we have those things here also. While I was out filming my last documentary at the test site north of you there, filming these craft in flight, we spent one day, usually we were out there all night, slept all day, but we spent one day, and some of our party climbed up to the top of the mountain, and while we were filming, a helicopter came out from about the area where the road disappears and goes into the Groom Lake area, the Groom Dry Lake area. It came out and flew around the valley, and we didn't know what it was doing, but a part of the mountain on the side of the Tickaboo Valley, as you're looking from that little turnout there where we filmed toward the Groom Lake facility, part of the mountain just opened up and this helicopter flew right into the mountain and the door closed and it didn't even look like a door. I mean, it was desert land.
I was on the same mountain and I saw the helicopter fly into what appeared to be a mountain, but I didn't see a door open, but it definitely disappeared.
Yeah.
I can show you on a map exactly where I saw that happen.
It's probably the exact same spot. But the people up on the mountain, they all thought it just disappeared. They didn't see the door open either. And if I hadn't have been looking directly at that spot, I don't think I would have seen the door open either. But I managed to see the door open, and this helicopter flew in, and it just closed back behind it. And it was incredible to watch this. It was like watching an old Flash Gordon movie. I don't know if you ever saw those old Flash Gordon serials, but they had a part where this spaceship is flying along and it goes into this mountain and all these cowboys are chasing it on the horseback, and they just go up to the cliff, and there's a cliff, and they don't know what happened. I remember that from when I was a kid. And the reason I remember it is because all of these things about underground bases and flying saucers brought that memory back to me. John, I think that people had better start paying attention to this and had better begin to do something, at least think. I mean, thinking is a starting point, I believe. But we're out of time. Maybe we can do this another night, do this again, because there's a lot of things that maybe we should have talked about that we didn't get to. Would you consent to come back on another night?
Sure, it's enjoyable. I can't believe the time has passed this quickly, but yeah, I think there's a lot of other things that we could delve into. I sure wish I shared your optimism, or I don't know whether it's optimism or realistic thinking. But certainly people have got to wake up, and there's no question about that.
Well, I think that our forefathers had the right idea, but I also think that they did this as an experiment. And I think that through reading their writings, it's clear to me that they were well versed in human nature. And they knew all the way back then that we would probably lose our republic through our own abdication, ignorance, stupidity, whatever you want to call it. But I think the experiment's not over yet because it's not gone yet, and I think we can take it back. If people just could be brought to understand what it is that they're going to lose, then maybe they would be willing to do something about it. But all throughout history, I see that even our own revolution was only carried out by less than 5% of the people who lived in the colonies. The rest were either solidly on the side of King George, or frankly, my dear, just didn't give a damn. So we'll just have to see. I don't know what my frame of mind is, except that I just absolutely refuse to give up. And every time I get down and think about it, I just have to look at my daughter, and that's the end of that thought. I mean, I'm back on track again and clear sailing. John, thank you so much for being our guest tonight,
and thank you to our listening audience. Good night, and God bless you all.